chooses not to go to another team, Brian Hoyer is going to start for the Browns next year. I am positive that unless he chooses to leave, the Browns have a bigger appreciation today than they did 4 weeks ago for Brian Hoyer. But talk to me about the end of Manziel's brief time with the Browns.
Well, it was unfortunate that it had to end on an injury, but it was almost a mercy killing when you think about it, considering how totally overmatched Johnny Football was. And I know everybody was all excited about him. I was too. A lot of people thought, hey, maybe this might be our lightning in the bottle. And the answer is not yet. I mean, you got to talk with, the family and stuff about this. We told the Rex Grosso story at the dinner table. But the thing about Manziel is, you have to remember that this is supposed to be his senior year of college. I mean, he came out a year early. It would really be a lot to expect him to come in and be able to literally, wreck this league, in his very first year. And I think that it's going to be at least a whole nother year of backing up, of, low expectations, of just him sort of learning everything. I don't think he's going to be ready to do anything next year except back up. I mean, I'd love to see it happen, but I think that in any kind of realistic terms, he's not going to be worth anything in the NFL at all until at least 2016, if ever. So I think everybody who likes the Browns needs to pretty much disabuse themselves of the idea of Manziel starting in the anywhere near future. So that brings up Hoyer. Hoyer has a chance to do something here if he's physically able to go, and if he's not, amazingly, Manziel did so bad that he set the bar so low that if Connor Shaw can come in and even look somewhat competent, even if the Browns lose, he has a very good job of successfully challenging Manziel for the number 2 quarterback spot next year.
I absolutely agree with you. I thought some of the veteran statements at the end of the season here this week were very telling, even about that. Joe Thomas was asked, what do you think happens? He goes, well, if we've got another quarterback around the draft, then, and if we don't, then it's going to be Johnny's job. I mean, we'll see what they're going to do. But that is, and I think for anybody thinking that we're crazy, oh, well, you guys just love Hoyer. Listen, if it's not Brian Hoyer, it will be veteran quarterback starting for the Browns next year. You can fill in the blank on who that veteran quarterback is going to be, because if they draft somebody else, they're not going to start him right from the bat unless they the only thing that I will say is I do not count out Ray Farmer's. Lee has had a thing for that kid for 2 years now, and I could see, you know what they say, because you and I were talking last week, and we used those expressions that everybody in sports talk likes to use. Well, you can't. We always like to use those terms. Well, you just can't go draft another. Well, what is the old saying about a franchise quarterback? If you think he's there and he's your guy, you go get him no matter what. So I will hold out the caveat that if Ray Farmer is convinced that one of these quarterbacks, Mariota or even Jameis Winston, who I have reservations about on a lot of different reasons, if Ray Farmer believes that that's his guy, then you go get him. And I'm not saying go get him. I'm saying if you believe that's your guy. I had to hear this argument about Brandon Weeden, so I'll definitely make it about a better quarterback. But if that's your guy, you make the move, you go get him. So I'm not going to say Ray Farmer won't package up 3 first-round draft picks and go get Mariota at the top of the draft. I don't foresee it because the Browns have so many other holes that they'd be better served bringing back a veteran quarterback, continuing to develop Manziel for another season. Hopefully the kid takes things serious, or maybe Connor Shaw gives you a different alternative as far as your developmental quarterback, and you hope that you didn't tick off Brian Hoyer, that he's willing to say, hey, you know what? I got a good thing here in Cleveland. I'd love to come back for 2 years, start for 1, and then we'll see what happens as far as year 2 with the transition or whatnot. And I think that for everybody that thought farewell Brian Hoyer 3 weeks ago, I think to me it's now the opposite. I think unless he chooses to go elsewhere or to chase an opportunity somewhere else, I think the Browns will be the ones holding the bag if he leaves, because I believe at this point that they have determined the value of Brian Hoyer to be higher than they thought it may have been a couple weeks ago. And I really believe it was a case of the grass looked greener on the other side, and then they said, wow, okay, maybe not. Maybe we need to slow this train up just a little bit.
That's right, and what's going to be really interesting to see, what the market is for him as far as, because people think, well, he really fell off at the end, he wasn't doing very well at all, but you say, well, he won 7 games with the Browns. Who has done that in a long time?
And what? Say what you will about the falling off, and I'll give you. Obviously, he had a tough stretch there, but I mean, as we've seen here, I think whoever the quarterback was having a tough stretch because of all the things that happened. I was looking at the stats, and I know that he's only like 55% completion percentage and all of that. I get you on that. Although to me, a few dump-off passes is the difference between 55 and 60%. But I don't necessarily look at that. I don't necessarily look at those, but even yardage. I mean, he's middle of the NFL. I mean, again, Brian Hoyer, to me, was a victim of the circumstances this year. Will he be the MVP of the league? Absolutely not. Can he get a good team to the playoffs season in and season out? Yes, I do believe he can. And I believe that until you have the guy who can be the MVP of the league staring at you in the face, then there's nothing wrong with going with the guy that can get you to the playoffs year after year. And I think the Browns' problem this year was you had somebody in your ear saying, nah, you guys are already there. You need to take the next step now. And there were too many people saying, oh, you guys are one player away. You're that one quarterback away. You're Johnny Football away from being a Super Bowl team. And reality hit the Browns when they said, no, we're not. We're 12, 13, 14 players away from being a contender. You know what I mean? We have a lot of other holes here. And I think the Browns, I think they had to screw up. In the last month of the season, they had to stumble and they had to go, hey, let's see. Oh, okay. Now I think their head's on their shoulders as far as where this team really is. I think they thought they were better than they were, and now I think they see where they're at. It's better, and there's still a whole lot more room to grow.
Right. I think that despite these problems at the end of the season, I think there's a lot of room for hope as far as people coming back from injury. A lot of young players, not just Manziel, but Gilbert, but even Terrence West. Just having a year of improvement and just physically, but maturing mentally, and as a football player, as far as being in the right mindset, it's just football maturity. I think and that's just going to take time. And I know we all get very very impatient, but that's something that's eventually going to happen, and it might end up being that Hoyer might be the best person to come back next year simply from, not just what he's accomplished, but also, so you're not rewriting history again, starting all over again. He's keeping the same quarterback, head coach, and offensive coordinator from one year to another would really be a good thing for this team to do once.
Stability, and for those of you guys that think Manziel's got a bright future, it's good for him if the whole status quo was to come back again next year with Hoyer as the starter, Manziel as the backup, but clearly entrenched as the backup, because I think part of the problem with the dynamic was you had so many people convinced that the quarterbacks were flip-flopped in the wrong spots. Now, if you redid that dynamic, I can guarantee you that come next year, nobody is going to be going, well, how long until one incompletion, people won't be cheering for the backup. You know what I mean? Being said, they can talk themselves. Remember, after a whole offseason, people convinced themselves that Brandon Wheaton was going to become an MVP with Norv Turner and his deep threat offense. Remember, by training camp, people were like, "Ooh, I can't wait to see Whedon in this offense." And then they realized it was the same quarterback in a different offense. And very quickly, Norv Turner's like, "I can't coach this guy. Really? You're giving me Brandon Whedon?" But anyways, so let me ask you too, because you just brought up the situation, veterans, and the end of a season and all of that. You heard what I said in the first segment. I'm just curious. You may completely disagree with what I said, but this is the first time that I can recall in years anybody caring enough at the end of the season to speak out truthfully on this Browns roster about things like Manziel and Gilbert and the way they were unprepared and did not prepare during the season as well. Well, like Carlos Dansby did. I think, man, that dude just paid for himself, not just in his play on the field, not just in the fact that with the playoffs gone, he still came back at the end of the season when he did not have to. He could have easily cashed that check, but I don't know, Jeff, you do this every year just like I do. When's the last veteran that you remember at the end of a season going, yeah, this guy needs to get better? Usually they say, well, we just have to work out in the off season and we'll get better. And, I'm not one to tell anybody how to do their job. That's up to the coaches. Whenever you say, oh, well, could the quarterbacks have played better? They're, oh, well, I'm not one to judge anybody. Carlos Dansby said, I'll judge you. These rookies did not come to play, and you didn't just hurt yourself, but you hurt the team. And I think that's what these guys need. They need more guys to talk real, to say, hey, you suck. It's not your fault. You don't have to suck. You suck because you're not doing this, this, and this. And I think if the Browns would have had guys like that for the last 10 years, maybe things would be better. Not perfect, but maybe things would be better. But for so long, this became a place where you cash a check and you cash in the end of the season. And maybe, just maybe, that environment is finally starting to change.
Right. Usually throwing somebody under the bus is not a good thing. But in this case, if there's a positive result from it, if it's the kick in the butt / slap in the face that these guys need, then that's really going to be a good thing. Because these guys have some talent, and, they aren't able to coast on what they did in college. They're not able to coast on their previous work ethic. They're being told that they have to move it up because, it's been shown to them over and over throughout the year that, look, that's not going to cut it. The level that we're playing at is up here now. So, and I think the other good thing is the fact that two guys who are in their first season with the Browns, in Carlos Dansby and Dante Whitner, have felt very comfortable about assuming that leadership role. Not like, well, I can't really say anything because I've only been here for 1 year. No, they're veterans. They're like stepping right into those leadership roles on the team. And when you look at teams that go all the way, teams that make it to the Super Bowl, they have those veterans in there, and they're not always at the very peak of their career. They're not always playing their best. Sometimes they're a little bit on the downside of their career, but they have that leadership that's needed in the locker room to bring a team up to a championship level. And it's just nice to see Dansby and Whitner showing some of that leadership that the Browns will eventually need if they're ever going to get to the promised land.
Absolutely. The only thing I take a difference with is your verbiage. I don't like the term "throw them under the bus" because to me that's not what what this would describe. Actually, if anything, it was just not covering for guys. Like, to me, if you've got guys that are not holding themselves accountable, that have self-entitlement issues and all of that, the worst thing you can do is go stand in front of the media as a coach or a teammate and go, oh, man, they're giving us their best every day. They're trying hard. They're good kids. They'll figure it out. Because if they know that they're not putting the work in, all you're doing is reinforcing that because they're going home and going, well, hell, this guy's just said I've been doing great this year, and I haven't even been trying that hard. So imagine what happens if I was trying a little bit harder, man. But they all of a sudden it becomes okay. To me, this is what this team has been missing. Somebody like you said that doesn't say, well, it's my first year here. I'm just going to sit back. I don't judge people. No. Dansby came out and said, listen, man, that's not what winning teams do. That's not what first-round draft picks do. This is a job. This is not, you know what I mean? Because there are people who will be unemployed in a week because of the play of John Manziel or Justin Gilbert or any other player that you want to name. There are people who will lose their job the day after the season is over because guys didn't take it seriously. Guys didn't do their job because you can't fire all the players. And I'm not sticking up for coach. You know what I'm saying, though. Like, that's what Dansby was trying to stress, is that there's people whose jobs are dependent on you doing your job. And that's where, again, that stuff can't be stressed out enough. And I say, too, I don't think enough credit can be given for Carlos Dansby coming back and playing these last couple of games because he did not have to. The season was over, and he would have been fully, just like they put Gibson on the IR, they would have easily just said, hey, you know what, rest it up, let's get you ready for camp. He said, no, I'm coming back. I said I was going to come back with a couple of games to play. Just because we're out of it, I am still going to come back. That will pay dividends next year when you've got a guy who is injured and he comes back instead of sitting it out, because for so long guys have come here to cash a paycheck. And I think that is the biggest difference in this year's Browns team, is they may finally be establishing a culture. It's not there yet,